Every experiencer has to overcome ontological shock, and we have to do it while the world says we're crazy. At Parawareness, we explore life through the paranormal lens, emphasizing psychology and spirituality over technology. This is Parawareness.
You look great, man. You look healthy.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. How have you been? All right?
Yeah, I go through a lot of struggles. The thing is that I never have any certainty in this world, and none of us really do. So it's tough for all of us.
See, this is where I disagree. I feel like we do have certainties in this world. And not only do I feel like we have certainties in this world, but I feel like that the phenomenon itself forces a person to uncover those fundamental truths, not just spiritual contexts. We'll primarily speak in spiritual context right now. You have two types of systems. You have a bottom-up system, and you have a top-down system. So Christianity is something that I would consider to be a top-down system, whereas the individual, the practitioner, makes a decision to give over his free will to Jesus and to basically just be an empty vessel to receive from God, right? Basically, you're saying, I have faith that this highest formation of existence that we call God or Jesus exists, and I'm going to be an empty vessel and be obedient to whatever my God asks of me, right? So we're giving over our free will in trust and obedience and with faith. Okay? That's a sort of a top-down system where you're receiving from a belief up top. And then you have a bottom-up system, which is, that's not to say that Christianity can also become a bottom-up system. Okay. Then you have a bottom-up system, which is more along the lines of like quantum mechanics and even like physics and Buddhism, even, whereas you're thoroughly examining the foundational truths of existence. Okay. And those are your absolutes. And then from there, you build a solid foundation, and then from there you begin to build up. And then as you're building up, what you're building on top of that and the conclusions that you're coming to are non-negotiable. Okay, there's no confusion there. There's no argument. There's no debate. There's nothing. And I mean, that was kind of the route that I went with. And when you do that, you find that there are certain things that are non-negotiable, that there is no confusion. And existence is one of them. Right? We exist. Existence is a foundational truth. A causality, the law of cause and effect. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Impermanence, right? All things are in a state of decaying and dying. That's just the way it is, right? That's another foundational truth. And when you begin to build off of those aspects of our reality and build upward off of that, what you're building off of that, there's nothing but clarity there. And I've noticed that when I did that, the voices, you're kind of taking breath away from them, right? Because if we can view, if we're going to look at this top-down, bottom-up system, right? And if we can view the voices or the phenomenon itself as like an interloper, something that sort of injects itself in the middle there and creates confusion, right? If you start at the bottom and work your way up and begin to push it up, or you take the Christian route, something like that, and you turn to God and you're just praying on your knees all the time, and then you're receiving from God, you're kind of pulling yourself up and out of that, is kind of another way to look at it. So another foundational truth is entropy, and that's a huge one. Having a good understanding of entropy has been immensely helpful in my recovery. Understanding that within every system, there is a constant state of disorder, right? There's always more complexity being added to it. And that complexity that's being added to it is essentially disorganization within a system. And the system, in order to sustain itself, will always opt for organization. Okay. and meaning that whatever is introduced to it will be challenged with something else to test its fragility, right, or its anti-fragility state. For us as humans, kindness, caring, love, right? These are the things that bring cohesion and organization into the disorganization. So, and if you can look at human life as taking two paths, essentially, right? We have the dog eat dog world that goes this way, and that's like capitalism and, business and politics and entertainment industry for the most part. And, I'm out to get, satisfy myself and get mines, and I'll do whatever it takes to be somebody in this world. That's the dog eat dog world. And then there's the dog feed dog world, where it's like, it's not just me here. Other beings have to eat and do well, and I'm here to serve others and help feed others and take care of others and to love others and be a better expression of myself, so that other people, that lowers entropy within the system. Okay, that essentially what that does is the information that's coming in, it organizes it in a cohesive fashion that actually works and is sustainable and it's efficient, right? So those, like, really harnessing in on those fundamental truths about our reality as your bottom up system, and begin to build off of that. Because when you can do that, all the other world religions, they fall in line with that. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, they all start making, so they're all saying the same thing, is that we need to be a better version of ourselves. And not only do we need to be a better version of ourselves, but we need to believe that a better version of ourselves actually exists. And that's what we're supposed to be pushing towards. Right? That's what no matter what the voices say, no matter what the phenomenon does, no matter what it implies, because everything it does is merely an implication. It's only an insinuation. Everything it says is just an insinuation. It insinuates this. It never really does it. It implies something that is meaningless. And we're to rely on ourselves and our higher belief system, of an orientation towards love and towards God, as what's going to keep all of this constant state of entropy in a state of organization and actually work.
We end up going into a thing where it's like, how much fate, how much free will do we have? And I think that, and how much of this world is actually just, based on what we believe will be the truth, what we believe, what we have faith in. How much of this world is just that, and then how much of it is free will, and how much of it is just cause and effect, right? And these things, because I've always been a searcher, and one of the main things that happened whenever I was young, two big things happened. One was I, at a very young age, at 4 years old, I got mad at all adults because they tried to get me to believe in Santa Claus. And I realized at that time, like, I don't ever want sugarcoating. I don't ever want anything but the actual truth. And then I, at age 12, I realized that I don't agree with the concept of hell and damnation and anything like that. So then I go on this journey all my life of trying to find the truth. And what I found is, in my opinion, there actually is no truth. I mean, I really believe that you say there are things that we can look at. And so what you've said is very helpful to me. And I'm going to take it today and try to get better with it. Because there are some truths, like you said, existence, consciousness, not necessarily, but consciousness is certainly a truth. We know that. That's might be the only thing that I do know, is that I am conscious.
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say that those fundamental truths can't be manipulated. You know what I mean? Like, because we manipulate reality all the time. In fact, the manipulation of reality is where people gain control. I mean, even with this stuff with all the Epstein files coming out right now, he manipulated people's realities. Like, that was his main thing. His main source of power and control over other people was the capacity to manipulate. Even with an interview with his old employer, Lex Wessner, the guy that owned all those high-end businesses, he got up on stage and apologized and said, I was severely taken advantage of by a very good manipulator. I believed the guy, and Epstein went off to like rip him off of like millions of dollars. And he was so good at manipulating his interpretation of reality that he didn't even press charges against him. Like, he was that good at manipulating people who believe his demented sense and interpretation of reality that he got them to do whatever he wanted to do, and he played on their emotions, right? Because our emotions are easily, if anything, this phenomenon teaches people is that our emotions are easily manipulated. But our emotions shouldn't be our interpretation of reality. I mean, unless you're allowing love to lead the way, or you're allowing compassion to lead the way, Right. But what you're describing is more along the lines of, and I go through this too a lot, the longer I'm sober, okay, I look back at my old way of living, and it's very similar to like knowing that we used to have slavery in this country. Like I look back at the fact that we used to actually have like slavery, like we had people up on a podium chained that we would sell for money and profit and labor. And I think about that. I mean, obviously I wasn't around for that, but that was a thing. We know that that was a thing. And I look back at that and I go, we used to do that? That's disgusting. I can't believe that we used to do that. Right? But back then, that was acceptable, and that was the truth of that time period. But now, right, because interpretation has changed, culture has changed, right, that human consciousness has developed more, we look back at that and we go, oh my God, that's gross. I can't believe we used to do that to people, right? And I'm like that with my past self. I look back at like the things that I used to do, and the further I get away from that person, and I look back at the things that I used to do, my shame grows. Right, my humiliation comes back tenfold. It's like, oh my God, right? But when I was in it, it was okay. Yeah, this is just what I do. I just get up in the morning and drink booze. Like that's, yeah, I go to work drunk. That's what we do. So, and now it's like I can't believe I used to do that. I can't believe I used to speak to people like that. I can't believe I used to treat my girlfriend like that. So it's a constant state of acceptance and forgiveness. Like, okay, right. But back then that was truthful to me. That was okay. That was acceptable. And now looking back at it, no, it's not. Okay, that's not acceptable. But I accepted it. I accept that at that point in time, it was acceptable. So, constantly forgiving myself, constantly being able to move forward. And with this spiritual roller coaster that we're on, with this process that we're going through, one day I'm way up, I'm way up here, and I'm talking with God and angels, and I'm like elated. I'm on this total high, and then all of a sudden, I'm back down here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just looked at that girl like that. Oh, that's all it takes, right? Yep. That's all it takes is some person to come at me sideways, and then I'm back in my anger again, right? So I'm up here in love, and then I'm down here with anger. I'm up here with compassion, and I'm down here with hatred. Up and down, and you're coming up into the spirit, and then down into humanity. And learning to balance those things, and kind of bringing heaven and hell together to meet here and balance each other out.
With this Epstein stuff, we're talking about horrendous, horrible crimes against humanity, like you're talking about slavery. And it's like, well, we have to forgive. We want to forgive. Our nature is to forgive. But at what time do we stop forgiving? And, like, how do we forgive those people? And that's a big thing that I think we're all going to be looking at in the near future, as our systems are revealed to be corrupt. And as all this is happening, then at what point do we say, okay, well, what do we do about the people that are doing these things? And so that's one thing I wanted to make sure and bring up today is like, what do you think? I mean, what's your take on that? If we find out that these people, that these elites have actually been sacrificing children and using sexual energy and things like that, and blood rituals, what do we do about how we forgive them, in your opinion?
Obviously, people want revenge. They want to see justice. They want something to be done about this, but if we can kind of step outside of it for a minute, which is very difficult to do because it's very, it just sucks you in. It's like a black hole. It's like an abyss of just disgust that really sucks you into it and captivates you, constantly. You want to talk about doom scrolling. This is the ultimate of doom scrolling this. And then he throws the UFO release shit in there as well, just to really throw some extra wood on the fire and gasoline on top of that,
Right.
But let me start off with this. All right. And this is where I come at it from like stepping outside of the whole thing for coming out of the abyss, right? What kind of people hurt people?
Hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people, hurt people. Tortured people, torture people. Right? And it doesn't look like that from our perspective. It looks like the rich and famous and the powerful are hurting people. You say, oh, they're not hurting. They're not tortured. Right? And then I always go back to what Jesus said, right? He said, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. They have, they look like they're in control, but I assure you, that is not display of control. That is the opposite display of control. Whenever a person has such a profound relationship with their own self-gratification, okay, and you utilize that self-gratification at the expense of other people, you are practicing Satanism. That for me, that is my definition of Satanism. Self-gratification at the expense of others.
Narcissism to the extreme, right?
Right. Self-gratification at the expense of other people and their suffering. You just don't care. At that point, you're a complete psychopath and sociopath. But it's not you. There's no involvement of a human there, of an actual human being, of a spiritual human being there. Okay? You're completely in it for accumulation, climax, gain, power, reputation, control, right? And the perception of other people to look up to you. You want to be that which others wish to emulate. And that's your driving force, right? So, and when you put yourself in a position where you desire to be that which other people emulate, you will then do the things that you believe other people want to be. And then from what it appears to me from everything that I've read is that it's all sort of held together and adhered by a blackmail system, meaning at the very upper echelon of control and power, they all have to have dirt on one another. Okay, and that's their form of trust. It's not actual trust. It's trust in the form of blackmail, right? Like, I trust you, Tony, because I know you at a core level, right? And I know that you're honest. I know that you are a man of morality, and I know that you desire to help other people, and I know that you have a belief in a higher power. And those are the things that create a trust system within me that trusts you. Okay? You go outside of that into the dog eat dog world. That's the dog feed dog world. Okay? Now, the dog eat dog world, right? Now, I have to trust you because I have something on you. And if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to expose you. Now it's a complete fear-based system, right? One's a system of love. The other one is a system of fear. Okay. Now you're doing the things that I want you to do because you're living in fear of me exposing you for having raped children. You tell me how much control you have. Really? How much control do you have over your own life and your own actions and your own words and your own display and your own finances and your own research and none. You are a slave to fear. You are a slave to fear and you're a slave to money and you're my slave. You're my slave. You're going to do what I tell you to do. And then there's somebody above me that's telling me what to do because they got shit on me.
Sometimes I think that the purpose of this world, in a way, the biggest lesson that we're here actually to learn is service to self versus service to others. And when you look at, of course, service to self ends up being, it's like, I like to look at Star Wars. And I look at, what ended up happening with Star Wars, right? You've got Darth Vader ends up killing the Emperor, and the Emperor, they're all killing, all the bad guys are all like hating and killing and planning against each other. And it's just like in mob movies where everybody's having to watch their back constantly, right? Like, oh man, they're constantly fear-based, like, we're talking about. And so the fear, the service to self, the narcissism is a snake that eats its own tail, right? What's that called? The Ouroboros?
Ouroboros.
Yeah, the Ouroboros. So it's the service to self is always going to end up being an Ouroboros. And the only way, because the trust isn't there in a service to others way, you have to have like you're talking about, you have to have some sort of glue that holds them together and forces them to work together, because they won't do it out of trying to help their fellow man, right? They will only do it out of fear, because and what you're saying, I agree 100%. I've thought this for a while, that I don't think that any person is actually happier necessarily than any other person, or that any person has a better life necessarily than anyone else, because the way I see it, it's like, imagine you're making a character on a video game on Madden, and he can jump really high, but that means I'm not going to be able to put as many points into his speed. You know what I mean? And I think that in this world, that's what we end up seeing, that the people who we think are, well, look, they have all the money, they have all the power, they have whatever, they have the thing that I don't have, and therefore they're happy, therefore they're better off than me. And I don't ever think that. Every time I think about someone who's rich and famous, I go, oh, I feel so bad for them, because the struggles that they're going through are just as bad as mine. They're just different.
Yeah. They're just different with more stuff. There's just more stuff involved, Yeah, that goes back to the foundational truth of impermanence. All that, it's just stuff. It's all just stuff. And one day there won't be that stuff anymore. Or there are people trying to steal your stuff. Or the stuff decays, or you die and you got to give all your stuff away. You don't take any of your stuff with you, right? So I think a key factor in all of this is learning how to become, right? Like learning how to be what is needed without identifying within yourself exactly what is needed. Because who am I to say what's needed? Right. Like even before this podcast, right. And this is an eternal argument I'll share with you that I have every time we do a podcast, right? The days leading up to the podcast, I begin having this inner discussion. What do you want to talk about? Maybe I should write that down. I should have a note thing here that I should write that down. And then my spirit comes in and my spirit says, well, how do you know that's what needs to be heard right now? So I don't know that's what needs to be heard right now. But I'm just going to write it down in case that is what needs to be heard right now. From whose vantage point, it'll say. Well, no, I don't have the appropriate vantage point, right? So I have this whole inner dialogue every time. And then in the end, I always just say, let me be a vessel for whatever needs to be heard. And I empty myself. And I just tell we hit the record button and we just go. And whoever listens, I just trust that this is what they needed to hear at this present moment in time. And in doing that, I kind of just take myself out of the equation. And then I learn that the more of me that's involved with these discussions, usually the worse it goes. This is a few months ago. Or no, you actually have the video. I did a Zoom meeting with the founders of the experiencers community and with a bunch of other people within the experiencers community that they weren't okay with us publishing, which is fine. But I was doing the same inner struggle while I was at work that day prior to having that Zoom meeting at night. And as I was having this inner dialogue of mindfulness about kind of what to go over, because the thing was just kind of give your testimony and speak about the targeted individual experience and gang stalking and things of that nature. And as I'm going over all this, one of the voices broke in and it said, they're all going to see right through you. Right. And and I remember like I froze in that moment, and I got scared. And I was like, well, what are they going to see? They're going to see I'm a fraud. They're going to see I'm a phony. And in typical ambiguity, I saw through that, right? That's what you want. You need to be so transparent and so empty that they can see right through you. Like, that's fine. See right through me, right? Have nothing to hide. I've lived the kind of life where there's nothing to hide, where nobody can blackmail a single little bit of you,
Right.
Nothing, because then it's all just an insinuation.
Right.
There's a difference between being full and reactive, being empty and responsive. There's a difference between reacting to the world, which is where we're saying our emotions are involved, right? And emotions are highly manipulable, and being responsive to the world, right? I'm just going to respond. Like, I'm here to be me as I am at this present moment, and just respond as is needed, instead of just being this reactionary thing that doesn't understand that there's a brief moment in the middle of stimulus and reaction where I have a choice. There's that brief little millisecond between cause and effect, right? Where I have a choice, where I have a moment to kind of take a breath and say, how am I going to respond to this? I think I shared with you, it was a few months ago. I said my 2-year-old came running across the living room and literally took a head dive. I mean, just a head dive into my crotch, and went right down on my junk. I mean, like a pit bull with a tire in its mouth, like this. And you want to talk about stimulus and reaction, dude? I wanted to just smack her right in the head and beat her across the room. And but I didn't. I was like, loving kindness. She's a daughter, real quick in that moment, that moment in between stimulus and reaction, where you need to really control yourself and not, and learn to respond to the moment with the person that you are,
That is one of my favorite stories of all time that anyone's ever told me in the world. That's so funny. And it's so indicative of what children are. You know what I mean? Like, they're just they don't understand the things same way we do. And so anyway, but that choice is made through practice. Right? Like, most of us don't until we practice making that correct choice. Then when the moment hits, when we are unpracticed, right? You 10 years ago, you might have had a different reaction in your instinct. Your instinct may have overruled, and you may have actually. Like, I remember whenever I was 24 years old, and I was dating this girl, and we had just started dating, and we were just sitting on the couch, and we were watching a movie or something, and she like laid her head down on my knee, and then just for no reason, she just like bit my knee. And I don't know if you've ever had someone like grab your knee where it like tickles and hurts at the same time if they clamp on it, And it felt like that. And my instinct was to just slap her. I slapped her in the head. You know what I mean? And I didn't even know I was going to do it. And I felt so bad. And I apologized, of course, up and down, but I think that when you practice that, you practice having that moment of going, wait, let me take a breath. Let me take a moment. Let me just take an instant to go. And the more that we get better at knowing ourselves and being in tune and in line with with our beliefs and stuff and with ourselves, then we don't make those reactions. So you didn't slap your daughter in the head, and that's nice.
Right. And I think a lot of that it comes back to the fear of self, because the more that we do react in that way, we begin to develop a fear of ourselves. Saying, oh, I am capable of smacking somebody, or I am capable of putting my fist through the wall, or somebody that I work with, and I already said her, but I'll keep her name off of here. Sometimes she watches the podcast, and I didn't get her permission to talk about her, but he also, and we have actually a very good relationship, but our relationship started off with a fight. Okay. And I had just started my my going through dealing with my own emotions in this experience. And I was, volatile. And I had a lot of stuff going on in my mind. And we had an altercation at work one morning where she came back into my section of the warehouse and was upset about something. And instead of responding in the moment with understanding and trying to see where she was coming at, I just reacted to what to her output. Okay. And next thing you know, we were going at it. And it turned into a big screaming match where he drove off. I immediately felt guilty. The employers were notified. Somebody went to the boss and said something. There was they had to do like an investigation on this altercation that I had with a female coworker. And I felt so guilty immediately afterwards, I was kind of going through this transitional time in my life, that I went up to her and I said, "I'm sorry, I know better. I shouldn't have, reacted that way." And I gave her a hug. And from that point on, her and I have been like this, right? Because she's going through her own kind of awakening and dealing with her own inner struggles and anger management and stress issues and getting vibratory states while she's sleeping and sleep paralysis and sort of her own onset to astral projection. And right, it's like turning, it's a spiritual thing for her too. And now it's kind of turned into this, like, we have discussions on the daily now. I'll take 10, 15 minutes out of my day every day, check in on each other. If I can offer some advice to what she's going through, maybe I've already been there, then I do, and I can tell that she's thankful to have somebody to be open with and share what she's, but, and now we don't treat each other like that anymore. Okay. So it's okay. What I'm saying is, I say all that to say, you're going to overreact, right? You're going to explode, and that's okay. But even in like Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll tell you, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Right? That's the key thing right there, right? Because then we're working on ourselves and we're doing what Thomas Campbell would say, we're lowering our personal entropy, right? Because our brain, our minds, our lives are in a state of disorganization, no matter what it was that brought us to this point, right? And by correcting ourselves, by taking life as a curriculum and not a harsh punishment, and self-correcting and governing ourselves, we begin to lower our entropy into a more loving state, which is, ironically, a higher energy. So we're lowering our entropy, hiring our energy, and that makes us less susceptible to being, manipulated or having some sort of an attack like that, where you're kind of pinned against another person.
Yeah.
So let me get your kind of switch topics here real quick, because what we're seeing, and this is just again my opinion, what we're seeing right now is the geyser effect of everything that we as targeted individuals have experienced so far. Meaning, I know I've always surmised that we are kind of a geyser to an underground stream or current suppression of the human shadow. Right. All of this. Have you ever seen Ghostbusters 2? Do you remember in Ghostbusters 2, they had that river of pink sludge, and every time they got close to it, they'd all start getting pissed off at each other and they'd want to start getting angry. And, it's kind of like that. Right. And if you can view each one of us as a geyser, like we're just a part of that underground sludgy, slimy stream of human shadow, of our shadow content that we're picking up on, and we're feeling that, we're responding to that, like we're actually like engaged with that and learning to control that. And some, the theories within the community are, everywhere. It's demonic, it's government, it's the elites, it's interdimensional entities, it's satanic, it's God. This is how God is. It's, it's astral, whatever it
It's
is.
ourselves.
And now, right. And now what we're seeing and consciously is the manifestation of all of that coming out. Right. So now we have the drop of the Epstein files. Right. So now a lot of people's convictions are confirmed. Right. And now we have Donald Trump on top of that saying, I'm now ordering the Secretary of who is it, Defense or whoever he's ordering to release all UAP classified files. Right. And then this morning I saw a quote from, what's her name? I'm not sure if she's a senator or Congresswoman Luna, but anyway, she's in charge of a lot of these declassified files. And she says that she has documentation that proves that interdimensional entities are 100% real and that they influence human behavior and that they've known about this for a long time. So now that's getting ready to come out into the spotlight. And then behind that, we have this war with Israel, right? When they're saying that the politics in general is being influenced by Zionists, and that essentially, we're getting ready to go to war with Iran, not Israel. I'm sorry, right? But they're saying that Israel is the proponent for this war with Iran, and that essentially, what's going on is that Iran has some sort of a grip or a hold on America and its politicians, and that they're only in the positions that they're in because of this, again, blackmail scheme that's going on that is entirely fear-based. Okay. And that essentially Israel uses America as its strong arm so that it can gain control around all of its surrounding area. Okay. And I guess what this does is it puts America in a position within Israel that we also, because of our relationship with Israel, will also have control over that whole area. And there's a lot of their God over there, gold, oil, and drugs. There's a lot of that going on over there. So of course that's a power move, right? So we have it all coming together, right? All of the stuff and if you're a targeted individual that has kind of allowed yourself to freely go down a lot of these rabbit holes, you'll see that each one of these rabbit holes has a little bit of credibility to it, right? But we personalize it. We say that, oh, this is what's happening to me. When really it's what's happening to us as a society, as a planet, right? This is happening around the world. We have targeted individuals around the world that are all experiencing the same exact systematic sequence of events. Okay. So what we're seeing now is the conscious manifestation of everything that we have spent the past few years of our lives, however long you've been going through this, unraveling. Right. So really none of this for a targeted individual, if you've remained open-minded to all possibilities, should have been some sort of secondary ontological shock. Right. All of that should already be gone.
Right.
Should be. Right. It should all kind of be gone. So now at this point, I'm just waiting for it to unravel even more because I've already gone down all of these rabbit holes and I found credibility within all of them. And I still adhere to the agnostic belief of I don't know, which I think is the best thing to do, right? The best thing to do is try to remain a self-contained, equanimous human being. Continue to raise your energy and your vibration. Okay, kind of put that stuff, if you can. I know it's in your head and it's going on, but look at that as something else that is occurring at an unconscious level that we're picking up on a conscious level. It's the entire planet's wrapped in frequency, right? We're all intertwined with this, again, the Schumann resonance, right? We're all intertwined with this frequency and it's all happening to us. And just sort of let it unravel. Allow the truth to reveal itself and use your own discrimination towards, your own discrepancy towards all of this as it continues to unravel, and try not to get caught up on any one singular explanation, because the truth of the matter is, and always has been, even up until now, we do not know, right? We don't know. Okay. But as long as we assume that we do know, you're going to behave according to what your belief is towards it. right? Like you're going to be the effect of whatever you believe the cause is basically what I'm saying, right? But if you can remove yourself from that, and again, going back to just remaining empty, but yet responsive to the world, then you can pull yourself back from that a little bit more.
So I read this book 2 days ago called To Hell and Back by an author named Kelly James. And it's only about a 40-page book, but what it does is it goes through the this person's experience of listening to EVP and then starting to hear voices and then starting to experience the full-on phenomenon. And what they came to was, hey, don't listen, stop listening. And I think that she said, I think that there's some kind of spirits or something, but it doesn't matter because they're not trying to help me, or, and blah, blah, blah. The basics, right? So she said, I noticed that I kept falling back into the problem. I kept falling back into listening to them and caring about what they said. And then I kept falling back into these negative feelings and things. And then she said, the main thing that I realized that I was doing is I wasn't being true to myself. And I was chasing these rabbit holes, even though God was telling me not to. So she's connected to, what she feels like is God because she grew up as a Christian. And so in her mind, she's talking to God and saying, please help me deal with this thing. And she said, you won't get God will not save you from it. You have to put in the work and God can help you, give you strength and give you wisdom and things like that. But she said, what I realized was I kept sabotaging myself. And it's so funny because I read that. And then the very next day, I wake up and which was yesterday, I have a recommitment to myself. And so I'm on Lent. I've not smoked a cigarette for 3 days for Lent, just, going along with that, just using it as a good reason to get healthier and happier. And then I wake up and I get a great workout in first thing in the morning. And then I have a meditation session while I'm listening to frequencies, and it's beautiful. And I feel connected to my version of God, and I feel connected to everything. And this was yesterday, and it felt so good. And I felt like, I turned a corner. And I went through the whole day and I worked and I got all these things done that I wanted to get done. And it was a beautiful day yesterday. Perfect day. And the voices were quiet. The physical sensations weren't that bad. And then at the end of the day, I'm lying there in bed and I go, I think I'm going to go look at that thing that I received about the aliens. Not to blame the person who sent me that website. Could be, is probably listening to this at some point, but it's not to blame anyone. It's not their fault. They were just sharing, just like we all share information. But I started reading it right before I was about to go to sleep. And it felt like one of those things where it's like, if I had been true to myself, I wouldn't have read that. And then, well, no, yeah. And then my day. So all night last night, I stayed awake. I was kept awake. My experience got way worse. The fear was back in. I lost hope in all things and lost faith in everything and went to just dropped to the bottom of my, everything went terrible. But it's exactly what she said. That if she had kept her focus, every time she would see herself losing her focus and getting back into going, yeah, but what could this be? Right? What could this be? I need answers. I need answers. I need proof. I need real facts. And what we're saying here is, I don't know, right? You have to, and the more that you can stay in that. So the point is, of course, and this is what I said, we both say to people in our group all the time is, it doesn't matter what the answer is actually. It changes your life in a way, knowing what's happening. But for the most part, you just need to be yourself. And so if you find yourself going down these rabbit holes and spending 5 hours of your day researching Jeffrey Epstein, right? And researching what's in those files and thinking about all of it, then that's what you're choosing your life to be like. And you're you know what I mean? Like, you're making your life about that, and you're making your life very much about fear and worry and anger and all these things. But if you're not, but you don't have to do that. And I didn't have to go look at that thing while I'm in bed. I'm about to go to sleep. And I thought, and it almost felt like mindless. Like I wasn't even really in control, of what I was doing. And it was just like, boom, and here I go. And all of a sudden I'm in Fearville, and now I'm awake all night, and then my whole life is ruined again, And it's like, but if I would have just stuck to my guns, which was, I know this is not a good time to be reading this thing. I know that I want to sleep. That's what I want. That's what I choose for myself, is to get a good night's sleep and wake up tomorrow and get back in connection with God and source and love and frequency and all that, and get my workout in. Instead, it was all different, and the whole day has been changed.
There's a couple things I do with that really help. And a lot of it has to do with just being aware, right? And if we can define awareness as the capacity to notice, that's really helped me. Just define, because a lot of people are like, what's awareness? Where is awareness? Is awareness here? Is it down there? Is awareness affected? I define awareness as the capacity to notice, right? Because a lot of life beings don't have the capacity to notice. They're just, they're just reacting to the world. And you could take a dog, for example. They don't have the capacity to notice. They don't have awareness about certain things. They don't have like an internal doggy monologue that actually says, I'm hungry. It's very instinctual. So, or be grateful, right? So being aware that the brain's number one job is to make sense of things. It demands order, right? It has to find an agreement, because that's what order is. Order is agreement. Okay. But yet you have this thing in your mind and in your body that the mind and the body disagree with. So there is a constant, persistent measure of disagreement at all times, not allowing the brain to find agreement. Okay. And then even when you find agreement with certain things, and this is kind of why we go through like a wax and a wane period, right? So we come across certain information and we go, oh, that makes sense. Right. And it's almost like a kind of a relief, right? But the disagreement's still there. There's still something intertwined with you or with me that is a form of natural disagreement. Okay. So but that's has nothing to do with me. Right. So, and in my head, I've been able to make a very clear distinction between that, that the disagreement that is within me has absolutely nothing to do with me. There's disagreement over here, but I'm over here, right? That's over there, but this is me over here, right? Whatever this is, it is not of me. It might be intertwined with me or somehow in me or connecting with me, but it's not of me. It's a very separate thing from me. So I'm not required to agree with that disagreement, because my mind will never find agreement with it, right? Nor do I believe that it wants to be agreed with, because if it did, it could, right? If it really wanted to be agreed with and it really wanted to manipulate me to believe a certain thing, it could do that. Right? It could very well just pop in once a day, once a week, in a very jovial manner. Hey, Kevin, I'm just checking in on you, making sure everything is okay. You're doing a really good job in life. Keep up the good work, and we're proud of you. It could do that, but it doesn't do that. It's never done that. It's always this harsh, brutal, derogatory, meaningless, absurd, obscure, ambiguous thing, right? That continues to want to, or can only, voluntarily or involuntarily, I don't know, create confusion in the mind and create a disagreement within the individual. So what that does is it constantly keeps a person looking for agreement elsewhere outside of themselves. And that keeps you digging, keeps you constantly digging. It keeps you constantly looking. You're constantly looking for an agreement. But if you can make a separation and just say, no, I can see what this thing is doing is it's trying to get me to do this. It's trying to get me out. And say, well, that's your problem. That's your karma. I don't know what the hell you are. I don't care what you are. I don't need to know. I don't care to know. That's over there. I'm over here and I'm okay and I'm enough. And my belief system that I have within myself is enough. Right. And then when I come across things like what you were describing with that alien file or anything, even with the Epstein stuff, right? And these names are coming out. All that does for me is it tells me where to orient my prayer. Right. Because I can see a very clear separation between people that, the dog eat dog world and the dog feed dog world, right? There's a very clear separation. One's a Ponzi scheme. That's a total Ponzi scheme. That's never going to work. It's made to collapse in on itself and then eat itself. That's just what it's going to do. I mean, we're doing that as a society right now, too. There's all this stuff where they're putting human remains into our food. Like we're literally eating ourselves right now, right? But that's what the Ponzi scheme does. It eats itself eventually because it's not made to work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It blows out of proportion and then it exaggerates and exaggerates and exaggerates and makes you really feel like you're going somewhere, like you're really somebody doing something and you're gaining and accumulating. And then it just collapses in on itself and eats itself. And everybody starts all over again or loses or whatever. And it doesn't work. And you have to know that, like you have to see that for what it is and have conviction in that. And when you come across shit like the alien files or you come across the Epstein files or, like whatever it is, now you know where to send your prayers because that's separate from you, right? In the world, but not of the world. That's what he means when he says that, when Jesus says that. I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. So that's the world. That's the world.
You remember what Reagan said about the aliens? At the UN speech. Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah. He said, imagine if we had a threat external, to ourselves, how much more we'd all kind of come together. And even that brings confusion into it because now you have people like Dr. Stephen Greer who's saying, well, that's the new thing that they're going to try and do. Right. So he's basically saying that Reagan was setting it up for what they're getting ready to do. And they're going to come out and present all this new alien technology as if it's from somewhere else. But essentially, it's going to be just another red herring to try to bring it all together under this new world order. Right?
And when you look at like the service to self and service to others, right? You've got Independence Day.
Yeah,
which is the president of the United States, Bill Pullman, brings everyone together and leads humanity in its greatest moment ever to fight the evil horde of aliens. And then you've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is like harmony and we're going to enter a new era with these beings, and it's like service to self, freedom fighters versus service to others of getting along but not having to be so I don't know, so scared, right? So it's kind of fear-based versus love-based. Those two movies or those two thoughts in all of alien lore. You're either fighting them to the death, or where it's going to open us up to a new chapter of humanity, right?
It's so patriotic, that movie, Independence Day. Like it really. And it's funny, they just brought that back out on Netflix too. I saw that last week. Like it was on one of their top things. Yeah, they brought.
I noticed that.
So you just happen to bring this back right now and start streaming it again. Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
thanks so much. And if the Epstein files shows us anything, it is that they will use information as a source of control, right? And if they can keep us in a state of fear, they can control us. And if they can keep us in a state of worry and doubt, then we need them. Now we need to rely on them. We're reliant on those that don't give a shit about us. My personal belief within all of it, I don't believe that any society could have ever made it that advanced. Like let's say that there is an extraterrestrial species that's 50,000 years more advanced than us and has way more technological capabilities. First of all, if they wanted us dead, much like the phenomenon, we'd be dead. If if they wanted to take over and take all of our resources and to it would just do that. It would, you know what I mean? Like, why all this? It would just do that. If that's what it wanted to do, it would have the capacity to do that, and it would just do it. Okay, but they don't do that. It's always this very weird, like, trickster type thing that it does, where it's showing us things, and depending on where you're at with your walk as a human being or with your growth, will determine your understanding of what it's trying to show you. Because if you're entirely embracing fear, then that's all you're going to see. That's all you're going to see is fear and torture. But if you're embracing love, then you'll see that too, right? So that's the one main thing that and then for a species to evolve to that point, it's not going to work either, right? Like Aristotle said, even evil will destroy itself. Like, if we keep going on this trajectory that we're on as a species, right? Do you think we're going to make it? Look at what happens when it's allowed to go, when the pyramid scheme is allowed to control and corrupt and propagate and navigate society. Like, it's just war after war after war that's entirely built on a hostage situation. That's what we have as a planet right now. We have a hostage situation where every major country is holding each other hostage with nuclear weaponry. Right? Don't do that. The only reason we don't act out and act a fool is because other countries have nuclear weapons. That's it. The only reason they don't act out and act a fool is because we have nuclear weapons. Right? And the second that any singular country gets something that could totally destroy the other country has to have it. Right? And the same thing, I surmise, would happen if we ever found out that certain mind reading technologies were also employed. Right? Is that Russia would try to use it against us or somebody else or the rest of the world to try to manipulate them to completely get them to turn in from the inside, like a microwave, destroy them from the inside out, completely disorient them, keep them in a state of confusion. And then the second that America found that out, well, then they'd use it against them. And then you'd have the entire planet trying to completely mind rape and mind, control everybody else. And then it would be on to the next thing. Who's got the next thing, right? So it's a systematic procedure of problems and solutions. And then with every solution that you have, another problem arises within that solution. And now you have another problem. So now you need another solution. And when you're trying to figure out a solution, well, now you got another problem because that other country just figured out what your solution is. So the problem and a solution, cause and effect. And it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And it only works because we're in a current hostage situation. And the only way that that's going to break free is with compassion and love and laying down your arms. Let's help one another out. And we see that with, like, the sciences. And this is one of the main reasons why I think, like, the International Space Station is such a wonderful thing, or even like the CERN Institute with science, right? Because it brings people together under the umbrella of discovery and exploration. You have people in the International Space Station. You have Russians up there. You have China up there. You have Americans up there. And they're all getting along because they're separating from the planet, first of all, quite literally separating from the planet and coming together up there. The same with other science-founded institutions. We see that a lot.
The thing that I always look at on this is that when you think about laying down the arms and all of us loving each other into eternity, it didn't work so well for the Native Americans. It didn't work so well for the dodo bird. The peaceful things in this world, what it seems like the lesson that we're being taught is love will be consumed by the tyrant. Love will be taken advantage of by the tyrant, and the tyrant will eat itself as the Ouroboros.
But hold on, but back up though. It would have worked out well for the Native Americans had we first entered into this country with an attitude of understanding, acceptance, love, and compassion. Instead of, I'm going to take this land and claim it as my own. It would have worked out very well, right? But we didn't do that. Instead, we came in, we raped, robbed, and pillaged, right? Segregated them, made them feel like the minority, put them in these, I've seen the reservations, where they're kind of living in poverty still. They're terrible. Like their conditions are poor. They've given them not very good land to live on.
Right.
And and they're still segregated, right? Meanwhile, look at what's happening with our country right now. We're not doing well. Like, so because it wasn't founded on love. I believe that it was originally founded on it was founded with good constitutional intentions, law and order is what really, but it wasn't founded on love. It's still a capitalist system where, you kind of have to be, if you really want to climb to the top of that ladder, like you really, you got to step on some necks. Like if you really want to do that and accumulate, and it's not really working out for us right now. Like if you look, but that's not to say that it can't, but I'm saying as long as that continues, as long as that whole thing continues, who's to say that eventually we're not that? I mean, we're a very young country, society, like a couple hundred years old. Who's to say that we're not going to get taken over? And I follow a lot of other podcasts. I don't know if you've ever listened to, it's called The Dark Horse, which is a good one. That's with Brett Weinstein.
Oh, cool.
He's an evolutionary biologist. He's Eric Weinstein's brother. He's very good. Like if you listen to him and his wife Heather do this podcast. And he actually went down to the Panama Canal and found out that Chinese immigrants are being funneled into our country, right? And they're just being allowed to come in. Like they're just letting them through borders into our country. And then they're setting up farms and they're setting up, and nobody's saying anything, right? There's like this, there's certain immigration that's being allowed to come in and flourish, and some that they're putting on a show and kicking out. Like, so, and it's almost like there's, and who's to say what that's all about? He wasn't even sure. He was like looking at it like, what the hell is going on with this? He wasn't entirely certain what the game plan there is. But who's to say that that's not what is going to happen eventually? Is that we're just going to get taken over by something else because we're so disorganized at the top. We're such high entropy and chaotic at the top and disheveled and compartmentalized within this organization that it's not going to collapse and something else is going to take over.
That actually applies to the Epstein stuff and the elites as well, right? And so this is, I would love to hear your answer on this. I mean, I'm not saying, I don't think that you have the answer to everything, Kevin, but I will say that I value your opinion so much. And I think you're one of the wisest people that I've ever met, but, is there a thing where if we don't fight the elites, if we don't almost hate them, if we don't fight and really get mad, how much anger should be involved in the Epstein stuff? And if the Epstein stuff and it's all aliens are involved and it's all been hidden from us and it's all been used and blah, 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 blah. How angry do we need to get to stop it? Because we need to stop it. We all agree on that. And what if the only way to stop it is for us to get as unloving as possible and start getting really pissed off, right? Like, what do you think? Is that in our equations at all? Or is there a chance that we'll all just go, yeah, but we're peaceful people, and the elites will go, good?
I think, and thank you for your compliment. That rubbed my ego in all the wrong ways. When you say things like that, or if anybody says shit like that, I listen, and in my head, I'm going, I don't know how to respond.
What do I say?
Do I just nod my head and agree? Because then I just feel like an asshole.
Thank you is always the proper response, right? Just
so uncomfortable. Anyway, but I think it starts at an individual level and must work outward. And that requires being responsible with ourselves, first and foremost, our consumption as an individual, the way that we maintain our individual lives, our families, our bonds and connections with our families, our relationships with our children. Like that saying says, face your demons, otherwise they're going to raise your kids. That's that's been number one priority for me. I have a 2-year-old. She just turned 2 years old last week, and I'm going to be 46 next month. And so maybe if I'm lucky, I might have another 40 years in me if I'm lucky, right? Given the life that I've lived as a recovering addict and alcoholic, I'm not quite sure the damage I've done to myself yet, but this is going to be her reality to grow up in. So making sure, the reason a lot of these industries like the porn industry and social media, which is, just terrible for kids' minds, like TikTok, and is because we allow them to get away with it, right? We're not setting up proper guardrails for our children. We're not educating our children or ourselves correctly. So be mindful, like what actually works when it comes to living together as a society. What actually brings us together in a more harmonious, less fearful fashion? Now, whether that's religion or it's spirituality, and being inclined to pass that on to our children. So, I will speak personally just for me, with everything that I've been through with this experience and everything that I've discovered and speaking to all the targeted individuals and the problems that I see happening, is that individualized religion, okay, is nobody has the absolute correct answer, right? So we can't say that any one of those is absolute truth. We can say that the themes behind them are truthful: passion, forgiveness, loving kindness, okay, awareness, mindfulness. So I'm going to impress those upon her. All right. Because we don't really live in a Christian country anymore, should this have ever been deemed a Christian country, which is how most people deem this country. This is a Christian country. No, it's one nation under God, and whatever your intersubjective belief in God is, okay, that may be drastically different than my belief in God, but it is one nation under God. Now, is your God the highest formation of existence? That's the question, right? Does your God gratify himself over the sufferings of other people? Because then we might not have the same God. All right. Your God might be something that's objective and directly in front of you and isn't subjective. That we can all agree on. That will bring us all together in a more harmonious fashion. I'm going to be teaching her mindfulness. Be mindful of your thoughts. Think about your thoughts. Right? I wasn't taught that growing up. I was raised Christian, and it was always just throw it down at the foot of the cross, and Jesus will take care of it, and God will take care of it. And, I ask for forgiveness and everything will be okay. And, and that really, and that is okay. Right. But I didn't practice it well. That was my own personal practice that I didn't that I didn't utilize very well. And for me as a drug addict and as a drug addict and alcoholic, I almost used that as a source of escapism. I would screw up. I'd feel shameful and embarrassed. I'd give it all to Jesus. I'd feel cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. And then I would just wind up doing it again. I wasn't really putting in any legwork or footwork to maintain my spirituality and growth towards my higher power. I wasn't mindful. Okay. So, and I had very poor impulse control. So implementing a practice of mindfulness is something that I'm going to really impress upon her, and the ways to do that. Being accepting of other people's cultures, which we've discussed on this podcast in the past. Teaching her appropriately about pedophilia. Okay. Teaching her appropriately about what pornography actually does to the mind, because I don't think a lot of people fully understand what pornography does to your mind. All right. What you're doing is you're engaging in an act between two people, and it's an act. It's an orchestration. It's not real love. Okay. You're watching an act, and you're self-gratifying. You're giving yourself an actual climax because of that. Again, you're engaging in self-gratification at the expense of other people. And you can say to yourself, oh, those people are making money. Those people are hurting. Those people aren't doing well in life. If you're in a position in your life where you're allowing yourself to be naked and having engaged in sexual engagement in front of the entire planet so that you can help the other person on the other side of that screen get off, you're engaging in Satanism, in my opinion. That is Satanism. Practicing in self-gratification at the expense of another human being. That is the problem with pornography. And it is promoted and is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. And it's prevalent and it's in the hands of every teenager. That shit needs to go. Like and if we can look at it from a legislative level, there needs to be some sort of actual laws set up against that shit. That stuff is terrible. I just read an article about she just turned 18. But for the ages of like 15, 16, and 17, she was promoting herself that on her 18th birthday, she'll get naked for all these other men that have been watching her since she was a teenager. And then on the day of her 18th birthday, she went private mode. She got, I think it was like $22 million. If somebody's listening to this, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a substantial amount of money of these perverts that just couldn't wait for her to turn 18 years old to watch her get naked. And they forked over millions of dollars so that on camera she could perform whatever that, where are her parents? What are you doing? Face your demons, otherwise they're going to raise your children. Right. So these are just some of the things. OK. And as a targeted individual, this is what I've been taught because I didn't see this. I was just watching porn. This is OK. Just because it's society, just because it's acceptable at the level of society agrees that this is OK, doesn't make it truthful. Doesn't make it OK. Just because society says it's OK or culture is all involved in it. Obviously, it's not OK. Don't be afraid to be against culture. Is what's going to stop this. All right. Don't be afraid to open your eyes to some other things. Just because people are saying this shit's okay to do, it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean that it's not rotting your brain from the inside out and lowering your cognitive abilities. Right. So we need to be aware. I think raising awareness. Okay. And this is what the Epstein files are doing right now. It's raising awareness. Right. So now at an individual level and at a level of promotion amongst one another's, we need to be cognizant of all this. We need to be aware of all this, and we need to start making appropriate actions to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to hold our politicians responsible. Right. We need to. And I actually agree. I was listening to a Democrat and I'm neither Democrat or Republican at all. Right. I was listening to a Democrat from California the other day, and he was saying that one of the biggest problems in politics is that it's a GoFundMe program. Right. Pretty much is that they rely on funds from private parties to fund their political campaigns. And then when they get in, now they're indebted to those parties. That needs to stop because somehow we need to figure out a way around that. Because that's not working. Because now you're just, as soon as these politicians get in, again, we're starting off at the very baseline at a hostage situation again. And then that hostage situation just continues to go upward until it explodes out the top. So awareness, all right? Don't be afraid to look at the Epstein files, first of all, is what I'm saying. Because if you're not aware, how are you going to know how to correct it? Right? I talked to an employee of mine the other day and I said, have you seen the Epstein files? I don't even want to look at that. And in my head, I'm like, you're the fucking problem. You're the problem. You're the problem. Jesus didn't say turn a blind eye. He said turn the cheek. Turn your cheek. Right? He didn't say turn a blind eye. So you have to be aware, but you have to be forgiving at the same time. Right? So, I mean, that's just me spouting off of the mouth and giving my 2 cents in all of it for what it's worth.
I agree with everything that you just said, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's wonderful. Thank you. That's a perfect answer. Okay, and I love that you framed it from, well, what am I going to tell my daughter? Right? That's right. Exactly. But I think you also are not done answering the question because
I am answering the question though. I am answering the question because What am I going to do? Would you like me to storm the White House gates? You want me to take up arms?
But how angry are we supposed to be during this process of holding these people accountable? How angry are we supposed to be?
All right. Let me ask you a question. As a targeted individual, has getting angry at this ever served you well?
Not one single second.
All right. Well, that's what you're supposed to learn. You don't respond to anger with anger. You don't respond to hate with hate, ever. What you do is you don't accept it. Right. So, and there's a story where in Buddhism, where when the Buddha was going through his ministry, it's the practice of a monk to go into town with their bowl and ask for food from people within the community that are supporting the enlightenment of the monks, because their enlightenment benefits the growth of the community and their lectures and their teachings and everything. So as the Buddha's going through the community one day with his begging bowl, he comes up to a merchant. The merchant sees him in his robe and with his empty bowl, and he loses his shit, right? And he says, "You filthy beggar, I work all day and I'm here trying to make money to feed my family. And here you are just walking around with your stupid bowl." He grabs a bunch of rotten food that he had sitting there and he throws it in his bowl, right? So immediately you would think the Buddha would get angry at him. Instead, what he did was he asked a question to the guy. And he said, let me ask you something. If I come to you and I try to give you a gift for whatever reason, birthday, holiday, anniversary, whatever, and you don't accept that gift, who goes home with it? And the merchant looks at him and he says, "Well, you go home with it." And he said, "And so it is with hatred." And he dumps the fruit on the ground. It doesn't belong to me, right? So we see it, we want to respond to it, right? That's the output, right? So we're watching the Epstein files, we're watching the internet, we're doom scrolling, right? And that's the output, right? Because all our eyes are is, it's a measuring device for input. So that's the output. This is the input that's coming in. How is it resonating with you? Right? Because that's an angry output. It's disgusting, vile, gross, inhumane, unorthodox, satanic, Luciferian, Machiavellian output. Right? Just waiting for somebody to resonate with it. Just waiting. It's just waiting for input. But you're the input. That's your job. Like how are you going to resonate with it? Are you going to output back? Like I said, when I look at this, now I know where to direct my prayers. Right? Because if I just bring it in and I let it resonate, well, that's going to resonate within me, right? And then all it's going to take is for somebody to come at me and honk their horn or give me the middle finger or do something. And now I found my output for all of that garbage. And then on and on and on it goes, right? It's an effect. It's a butterfly effect, right? Whereas I see, now I have output too. You need God. You need a higher power, man. You need some sort of rehabilitation in your life. You need love. You need compassion. You need to stop viewing people as subhuman. No human is subhuman. Because the second that you say that person is subhuman, well, now what are you, a demigod? You see, automatically you're putting yourself on the platform of a demigod the second that you say that person is beneath me. Right? Now we're back in slavery time again. I can't believe we used to do that, right? There's going to be a day when we look back at this time and we just go like this and we go, I can't believe we did that shit.
For sure.
And you have to see that. You got to play that tape out a little bit, right? Because it's only going to work one way. This will only work one way. Love. That's it. It ain't going to work the other way. It's not. This whole system is not designed to work the other way. It's not.
And to accomplish things, you don't have to be more angry to get more done. I mean, it can help sometimes to go, okay, I got really mad when I was weightlifting and I was listening to, this angry music. I was listening to Rage Against the Machine and dude, I lifted better weights that day than I ever, you know what I mean? Yeah, we get the power of anger, but you don't have to be more angry to achieve more and to get things done, right?
No.
But people think, a lot of people think right now, y'all aren't mad enough. And it's like, no, you're not paying enough attention. You're not taking enough action. You don't need to be any angrier. You need to take more action. You need to care more and spend more of your time on it and your focus on fixing it, not being angrier. But people are saying that a lot right now on social media. You all need to be angrier, so.
Right. And and when I say that, I want to be very mindful to emphasize that I am not downplaying by any means, right? Just because I am being mindful to not allow myself to be engulfed in hatred and anger does not mean that I do not have the utmost of compassion, respect and love for the people that have been abused during this. Those two are not, that's not the same thing. I'm saying that I understand that it's better to be aware and informed to make sure that this shit doesn't happen again, and to express love and compassion towards the entire system itself to bring chaos back into order. That's what I'm saying. That to me is ultimately what needs to be done. Could you imagine right now any one of these senators or Congress people that are in charge of doing something about this, right? If they were just, every time they got up there, they're like, you, and you're disgusting, nothing will get done. They need evidence, right? Which takes equanimity. They need awareness, which takes looking at these horrific videos, unredacted, and gathering testimony from these people. And it takes love and compassion towards the victims to really empathize with the amount of suffering that they went through so that they can push for the appropriate penalty. Okay. To correct this, to correct the system, because it's one big giant system. But continuing to throw hatred and anger back into it, that's for a season, right? That should be your initial shock, this disgust and anger and hatred. Let that go. Let that go. Right? Don't find an outlet for that somewhere else. Don't take it out on family members or kids or coworkers or neighbors or church members or, this is what we've gone through. We've gone through a process of equanimity. This is what we've gone through as targeted individuals. We've gone through a process of self-containment and better impulse control, right? And although we may not be in a position to really do something about it, like go and, at a lawful level, at a judicial level, we can do it this way. This is how we do it, right? Leave good comments. Watch this, share it, watch this, share it, subscribe to it, right? And I'm not saying that as self-promotion. I'm saying that as this is the right thing. This is the only thing that we can do. This is the only thing that we can really do, is do videos like this to maintain our own composure throughout this time, and to help other people also maintain composure throughout this time, not allow their anger to alleviate and jump to conclusions and take it out on undeserving and innocent people that don't deserve it.
What do you do with your family whenever you to prepare for a fire? You make a fire safety plan. You look at what would our life be like? What would the moment be like if we had a fire in this house? Well, if it's right there, that changes it, versus if it's right there, we need to have our escape routes planned and things like that. And I think it's very wild that people should be doing this more with aliens. They should be preparing their family. They should be having conversations instead of running away from it about Epstein, about AI. We should all be having more conversations with the people we love and going, hey, what would we do if this is real? What would we do? Not to create fear, not to all sit around and get scared and whatever, but to create a fire safety plan. What's our plan if this is real? How does that change my world if I find out that aliens are confirmed by the government and that they've been in contact with them for, 100 years or whatever? You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that that safety plan needs to be founded on the serenity prayer. Lord, help me to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because there's a lot of stuff the only thing that we really have control over is ourselves. That's it. I can't control you. I can control myself. Even as I'm watching you and we're doing this entire podcast, and this kind of goes back to what you and I to what I was just kind of discussing, was that as I'm listening to you and your experience and everything that you're going through, if it's in my head, I'm like, man, is it demonic? Is it spiritual? Is it like some entity? And I want to get angry at it and be like a fire and brimstone preacher and put my hand on your head and chastise, But again, what am I going to do? Am I going to, so what I'm doing is I'm doing my own output in that moment. I'm praying. As you're talking about me, about your experience, I'm recognizing I have the capacity to notice. I'm aware that anger is building in me, right? But I'm outputting. I'm praying for you in that same moment. I'm outputting. It's going back out, right? So that That right there, the capacity to notice, transmute it, your own output. Right? Don't resonate. Don't let it fester and harbor it in and just become one of the, don't do that. Transmute it, back out.
I love that. Take it in, transmute it, and then determine your output. I like
exactly.
that. Yeah. Dude, thank you so much.
Love you, Tony.